COVID. And so she is entrusted it to us to carry forward. So, couple of things. Welcome. There's people around the room wearing basic type stuff for Will. He's brand new. He hasn't got his tag. Today he's earned his coffee stores left and right. I've already had one person try to find it, so just wanted to point that out. And let's see who else from the NRCD. Jason is back there. He's our ag specialist. We have a couple of board members who you met, Alyssa from walking in. Jared Henry, also a board member, a budget honorary board member, and NRCS district manager. And am I forgetting anybody else? Alyssa, I already got her. All right. So what are we here for? Well, this is basically local conservation. Your opinions, your thoughts matter here. And so what we're trying to do is get your concerns, list of priorities related to everything from water quality, forests, wildlife, climate, croplands, soils, any other natural resources you may have a concern about. We want to hear it. We also want to hear about what you think your needs are, where the gaps are, and really where to brainstorm also future solutions for that. And the idea here is we get a pool of money through the NRCS. It traditionally used to go out on ranking systems statewide. And what we're doing is pulling that money across the state into districts, and we're going to distribute that money based on the concerns that the people in this county have, rather than being driven across a wider swath of the state. So this is why your opinions, your thoughts matter here today. Let's see. So we got a couple of things that we're going to be going through. To the next slide, yeah, sure. Just so this is only my second time ever doing this, so bear with me. We want our agenda is we have a couple overview that Ben and Jared are going to tag team on, and then we have a couple of questions from. I'm going to be here on time. He's running a little bit late, but we have farmer's perspective, we have VCs, and our county forester giving quick slam session of why this all matters and putting it together. After that, we'll break into groups, and at your table, we've got these sheets here. There should be another, this one, yeah. Sheets like this, everybody's going to fill one of these out, and we're going to talk about them in settings. We're going to break out into different table sessions, and then we'll report back out like we discussed. Bring it to the larger group, and then that information will get summarized and come up the list, and then we'll be feeding that information back out to you in a later date. So without further ado, right into it. Yeah. All right, so bear with me. I received this presentation about 45 minutes ago. But the purpose with this presentation is why it's important is to give you kind of the background and context of what we're doing here today, to kind of the foundation of how it's going. I should back up and say it's nice to see everyone. My name's Jared Henry. I work for the Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation as the Orleans County, well, actually, as the A county forester. We're changing it. We kind of don't have our districts anymore. I still cover Orleans County, but I also have worked with the Conservation District for Paul. You were on the board then. I'm a former board member, but because of 12 years ago or so. When I joined. So, but the conservation districts are a lot older. The conservation districts were started, really an event that started things were in the 1930s, the Dust Bowl, realizing that we had a pretty heavy exploitation of the land that was resulting in a rapid
destruction of our natural resources. And from that, the Soil Conservation Service was formed as well. Well, that became NRCS, as well as the conservation districts. And the purpose of the conservation districts was to be that local voice of conservation and connect kind of the nexus between the federal agency, NRCS now, and the community. And so we are the voice of the community and supposed to bring kind of in between, bring the voice to the feds to explain what's going on, what the feds are trying to do back to the community. So what practice 67547BAC is and what that means and the forms that go associated with it. Back to you, Dave. Next slide. So there's conservation districts all around the country. Some are really big in Portland, Oregon. These are huge entities. And then some are smaller like ours here. Here in Vermont, there are 14 different conservation districts with a variety of programs. And yeah, these are, we're going to go to the next slide. So the actual statute that passed in 1939 formed the conservation district. In Orleans County Conservation District came into existence in 1946. So we've been around for a while here in Orleans County. We're non-regulatory, so we're not the enforcers of what's going on. And there's 5 community members that make up the board. I'm an associate supervisor, so my role is kind of like technical assistance to the board. But we have 5 community members that are board members. To be a board member, you have to own land here in Orleans County and be a resident of the county. Next slide. Sarah? Okay.
This one?
That's right. Can you go back actually? No. All right, it's a little different. All right. Different than even it was 5 minutes ago. Okay, next slide. Let's open this. So this is basically a list that I'm sure everyone on the way back can read. You can see it through the column, right, Steve? Yeah. Perfect. But really, it's trying to get at the breadth. So from this, what you can't see maybe is there's a long list of things, and that long list of things are the different programs that the conservation district does. Everything from water sampling to the annual tree sale. Has anyone brought a tree from the tree sale in the conservation district? Nice of you. Those that haven't, the conservation district's tree sale, each year we sell trees, fruit trees, all kinds of trees. It's now live, so you can go to our website and you can buy trees. You can also get trout now. You can start food. And that fundraiser happens every spring. It's now live. You can buy yours and get it because they actually do sell out. They also do a lot of riparian restoration work. And then really, I think this is the heart of what the conservation district does is you're the person that hopefully somebody knows that you can go to and talk to. Sarah has just amazing connections with everyone from the road foremen throughout the community to individual farmers. And so that's that translation piece to say, hey, I need something. I have a need. I have a challenge. Can you help me? And then the conservation district comes with the knowledge of the different programs available to try to connect the pieces so that every farmer doesn't have to know the 143 practices that are out there and what's available today. And then also to work with NRCS to say, hey, these are the needs I'm hearing. We're having these issues here. And then bring that forward to then prioritize funding efforts. Let's go. So, everyone hop in? Sure.
So I'm Ben from OPAN, I work with the Department of Environmental Conservation as a watershed planner. So I'm going to hop in here and talk a little bit about why we're here tonight. Is part of a local work group meeting. And so what I think is the public input on how federal conservation dollars are best spent in the community. And so it's really about gathering that data. And really for this process to be effective, we really need to get input from across all the sectors of the community. So the idea is the conservation district and NRCS might not know all the details about what's going out there on the ground or how to be most effective in putting these dollars out onto the table. And so getting this local input is really helpful in terms of making this process the most effective. So move on to and so really one of the main focuses tonight is this idea about a local funding pool that Ted mentioned. So there's this opportunity to identify specific resource areas or specific practices that the district could fund on a local basis. So how it's historically worked is that folks put in for funding and you're ranked against everyone across the state of Vermont. And so that's a little bit challenging. You're less likely to necessarily get funding. And so by creating a local fund pool, we can identify specific practices that could be most effective in this county. And so it's a real opportunity to get this public input in terms of how to set up that local funding pool. And then also provide some feedback for NRCS in terms of how they do their ranking. So there's an opportunity to provide this information up to NRCS about how they're making some of those funding decisions as well. And so there's a couple of different steps in this process. So Sarah sent out the assessment survey. And so if you haven't filled out that survey, definitely encourage folks to do that online, or there's some paper copies out today. And we have our community meeting. And so this is where we're really looking to get this input from you all this evening. And then we're going to take that information and meet with a smaller group of partners and some of the technical folks to take all this great community input and try to formulate that into a plan for this local funding pool. And then that's going to go be the basis for developing a conservation action plan that really identifies how to put all this stuff together and have a plan to implement it. And then this goes back out to sorry, this is my notes again. Trying to do this on the fly. And so this is going to go to the NRCS State Technical Committee meeting, and they're going to make some decisions about which of these local funding pools they're going to support across the state. So there's an opportunity for the district to try to make a real strong proposal to meet the needs of the community through that process. And again, that's where we really need input from all of you to make this effective. And other folks from conservation districts who've been,
Question, is this the first year that the funding was locals?
So there have been these local funding pools historically. It started a number of years ago, but it's really the first year that this process and these conservation action plans have been put front and center, and that a larger amount of money is heading to these local funding pools. So it's kind of a shift more in this direction. And Dave, I don't know if you want to speak to that more specifically about kind of how much these have gone on. And I think the district has done some of these in the past. Right. But the idea is that it can kind of expand and a greater proportion of the money is heading through these local.
Yeah, it's traditionally for some time now, we've had these funds involved with statewide. Everybody who applies to them competes with everybody else in the state. Our newest state conservationist came on board a few years ago, and his feeling is that he'd like to see less funding to statewide, and more funding to and really historically that's the way it's operated. That's a so it's kind of like that really to our roots. And a number of districts, this one included, has been proposing and doing these local tools for a couple of years. And the idea is to other districts and to get to where they're all the applications and what which is state department.
We had a meeting simply just a few years ago. Out of that, I think it was one of the first local pools that became important or identified from that meeting in case of species were a big problem. So there's funding specifically dedicated to the county for landowners to manage invasive species. That was like one tangible output. But that was, I think it started somewhere at $50,000 for the county, and then it's increased since then. So it's like a big shift, whereas the all of the money was statewide, meaning if your project comes in, you've got to compete with every other project versus you have to compete with people in Orleans County on a specifically identified topic. That's kind of the transition. Is that accurate?
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a good way of doing it.
Yeah, so, there you go. So a couple key points here just about Orleans County. So this is the local working group. This is why we're here. Then just to kind of get the thinking a little bit about what is going on as far as our natural resources here. Here in Orleans County, we have a population increase of 5%. Doesn't say over the time period, but it's not that long ago. And actually, it's something, an interesting report that I just had seen that looked at shift also with ownership of land. And looking at the time period between 2004 to 2016 in parcel ownership kind of designation as either residential or woodland. So woodland are those parcels that are just, they're kind of managed timberland, or it's like a 100-acre parcel with a deer camp that we consider woodland versus 100-acre parcel with a primary residence on it, that would be residential. If you look at all of those across the state during that time period, the greatest transition in reduction of woodland parcels was in Orleans County. And it was a 34% reduction in woodland parcels. So that's transition of those, what historically have been woodlots, to a residential ownership. And with that comes other changes. And so these are changes that are going on. And the need for more technical assistance programs and services for new landowners. You have the population's increasing, we have new landowners. So needing to reach out and assist those landowners with different stewardship practices. The need for more connection and work with the real estate community. This is a big one. There's lots of transactions going on. I run into this a lot in relation to the parcels involved in the parent use program. Do you have any realtors in the room? Great, I can say anything. Because they often offer guidance on this is what you should do. Whether or not it's always correct is another story. And we drive a lot. We're strapped for time. We're less engaged. There's a lot going on in our lives. And so because of that, we can be distracted away from the natural resources. And so coming back to our focus on that today, Orleans County, we've got a lot of water. The different counties in the state. Orleans has it's the pond county, the land of the ponds. They're also up there in agricultural land. Agricultural lands, farmland acres, a little over 121,000 acres, of which 52,000 about enrolled in the current use program. I would say, and I'm just kind of winging this a little bit, but when I think of ag counties in Vermont, I think of Franklin County, Addison County, and then Orleans County. But the then Orleans County, what I'd like to remind everyone is we're also still 73% forested. So we have a lot of forest land acres, 346,000. Of those 346,000, about 130,000 are enrolled in the current use program. And with that, there's also a lot of conserved land, about 50,000 acres. Like we've got several landowners here I see with Vermont Land Trust conservation easements on their property. We also have some public ownership. Hazen's Notch, Jay and Willoughby State Forest, and several different wildlife management areas in the county. Next slide. Top 3 soil types in the county: Cabot loam, Tunbridge. Anyone know the state soil of Vermont? Come on, who knows it? Give you a hint. Cabot's the one I always come back to. It's like the hardest thing to work on. Berkshire lumber is Lombard is the third. Let's go to the next. Okay, that's for this. Here, so these are some, and we'll put these slides up, so don't worry about trying to read what's going on here. But interesting things to note is we have, so this is looking at the ag census from 2017 to 2022. And you have a reduction in the number of farms, but something that came up is you're not really have a change in the number of cows. So you're seeing a transition there. And we have people in this room that can speak to that better than I can. But there's change happening. And that change ultimately has impacts on our natural resources. There's overall, a lot of that change too is a reduction in number of our dairy farms, and there's some new veggie farms. And then the other thing we've seen, this isn't so much in the last few years, but if you go back 8 years or so, significant increased number of taps. So maple sugaring, there was a big boom. Probably if you go back like 8 to 4 years ago, there was a lot of increase in number of taps. So it's kind of slowed down. Next slide. So from this, we mentioned the survey. If you haven't already done that, please do. But here are some preliminary results from the information we've collected from the community so far from the survey that's been out for about 3 weeks or so now. When asked about water quality and you're considering the Coventry landfill and agricultural runoff. Then if you go to climate change and land use change, the challenge is the top things we're hearing: flooding and erosion, increased extreme weather events. The last few summers, we've had plenty of that. The heavy rainfall and outdated infrastructure, culverts, roads have led to severe flooding and soil erosion and habitat destruction across multiple towns. Forest and farming changes. We got deforestation, invasive species, the decline of local farms through the economic pressures threatening biodiversity and sustainable land use. So this is just, again, what we're hearing from the survey. What are the primary barriers, if any, to achieving the solutions and addressing resource issues in Orleans County? What we're hearing: number one, funding and financial constraints; two, political and bureaucratic challenges; and education, landowner resistance, cultural barriers, for individually, and then kind of come within your small group and share out. What we ask is some ground rules here for the discussion is one, we'll be mindful of time. We're going to do our best to keep things moving along, recognizing thank you all for sharing your evening with us. We don't want to keep you here past 11 o'clock. I know you all signed up to be here till then. So please limit your sharing to no more than 3 minutes. If you've already spoken, give others the opportunity to share. If you're a talker, take a moment before you talk and let someone else talk. If you don't talk, challenge yourself to share your ideas. Number two, acknowledge the scope of limitations. We're here to discuss and collect feedback, but not to reach consensus or make decisions. Not all concerns can be addressed through this process. So this is the collection point. We're not here to solve all the world's issues, but we're here to hear about all those issues and then put a pathway towards solving them, all of them. Just in. Listen and be heard. There are other ways to participate besides speaking tonight. Take the survey, attend the local working group public meetings, or contact us to share your ideas. So if you're not comfortable sharing in a group, that's fine. Share in the survey. Find a different way. And we're trying to put out as many different ways to collect feedback to get everyone's voice. So with that,
Can I ask a scope question? So, and this is my ignorance. So we're talking about a county, but there are things that don't stop at the county line, like rivers and aquifers and all kinds of things.
I don't know. It's just the line all stops there. Missisquoi doesn't go anywhere else.
And this is just also my ignorance. So who would be dealing with the issues like, you know, is there really adequate floodplains along the rivers that go through our county? Is that something that can be spoken to through this, or is that a whole separate group of organizations?
Right now, what I would suggest is think about it more of the concerns. So if like the concerns, are there adequate floodplain protection?
Right.
Or like, so highlight that right now.
Okay.
So let's get it all down on paper and those
An
concerns.
individual land parcel?
No, it's county-wide, but but each one, so I'd say it's kind of like both. So say that floodplain protection, well, there's many parcels that are within the floodplain of the Missisquoi and the Black River. So it kind of functions at both.
Okay,
Just jump in. In terms of that watershed scale, we do in the state of Vermont, my role is as a watershed planner. And we have the state broken up into 15 different watersheds, and we developed what are called tactical basin plans. And so the conservation district is a real active partner in that, and that will really guide this effort. So there's a lot of overlapping planning efforts, so we do try to focus on those different
okay.
scales.
So it's more identifying issues that's important from the community, not, okay. Yeah, got it.
So. Moving on. Thank you, Jared. That is awesome. Terms, we're getting into 3 different presentations. 2 you've already heard a little bit from Ben and Jared, but I will make them talk a little longer. And then the next person I want to bring up is Joanne Lidback. She is also our board member with our Orleans County Conservation District. We're still there. Anyways, she has a farm over here.
Schultz had from Oregon, so that's why I
Yes.
chuckled at that. So thank you, everybody, for coming. I'm Joanna Lidback. My husband and I have an 80 cow dairy over in Westmore, and we needed a release milker tonight, and I'm a release milker. So here I am, and I think I brought some authentic barn smell with me too. So and really quickly, I wanted to share with you, this is our slams. I'm gonna stop myself. This is the agriculture slam. So I'm going to try to share with you from my perspective, and maybe if anyone else has any thoughts, they can help me out here too. Just some 3 big wins that we've had from a conservation district standpoint here in Orleans County, and 3 big challenges that remain from an agricultural perspective. And your point is well taken as far as like, well, these issues don't really stop at the county line. No, ma'am, they don't. But I would tell you that Orleans County has one of the most active and fastest growing conservation districts, purely from a budget standpoint, in that we are just sort of able to, we've got a real gem with Sarah as our district manager, and able to pull in different programming and funding and people. This is Will's first day, probably already mentioned that, but this is Will's first day, so wonderful first day to get your feet wet. Anyway, so my 3 big wins for agriculture. The first one I mentioned is personal to me. My husband and I, being an 80 cow dairy, we're considered a small farm, and we're actually a certified small farm dairy now in the state of Vermont. 2017, Vermont started the Vermont Ag acceptable, required ag practices, which meant that they were trying to sort of cast a wide net and bring all farms under certain regulations, including nutrient management planning, or basically defining us as CAFOs, which, quite frankly, fine, well, it's a CAFO. My hope is it sort of helps to demystify the term, because quite frankly, all it means is we're measuring the nutrients coming in, the nutrients going out of our farm, and it's a good thing. It gives us lots of information and data so that hopefully we can, continue that sort of conservation-minded planning on our individual farms. So I would call the conservation district's work in helping to disseminate that information and get more small farms like my own on board with nutrient management planning a win. The other one is another big win for us is and I don't know that the district can take like all the credit for this. I think climate change has something to do with it, but Vermont has been known as one of the fastest growing acreage in cover crop planting in the country. And now Orleans County is finally catching up with the rest of Vermont. I happen to think that our location in this northern climate maybe had something to do with our slowness and adopting that because our farm was one that finally got to take advantage of some cover crop planting this year. And that had a lot to do with the weather. So, but we're not complaining, and we'll call it a win. And then the third thing I would just say is just the outreach that has happened. And Sarah has been very focused. So one of the other unique things about conservation districts and how we operate is we are like a self-contained organization and body. And so while we work with other county districts, we are our own thing. And so we can do what we want. And a lot of what we do starts with meetings like this and listening to what local landowners or what the concerns are. And so if those more vocal folks are farmers like myself, then we focus a lot on agriculture, and that's what we've been doing. So anyway, so I would say our outreach is another big win for us in Orleans County. Challenges remain, of course. And I think we've probably kind of mentioned a bunch of them, but we continue to focus on water quality improvements, and also keeping up with regulation, and then economics, the economics for local dairy farms. It's as much as I spend a lot of time in a day job working with other farmers with their financial management and planning and analysis and goal setting and all that good stuff. As much as I want to say it's gotten better, it hasn't really. It's just a matter of playing the cards you've been dealt and trying to stay on the board. But anyway, so those economics remain a big challenge for not only just dairy farmers but farms. That's my spiel, and that's my slam. For your slams.
Yeah, so Sarah asked me to give a little bit of update on water quality in the county. And so there's a couple of water quality challenges that we do have. So most of you probably know that the Orleans County is split between the Lake Memphremagog and Missisquoi watersheds, which drains into Lake Champlain. And both of our big lakes have elevated levels of phosphorus. And so they're both considered impaired. And that level of phosphorus causes algae blooms, as most of you probably know. And so the state of Vermont has developed cleanup plans for both Lake Memphremagog and for Lake Champlain. And we've been working hard over the last almost decade now trying to implement those cleanup plans. And that's a lot of why the required agricultural practices came into place. And then we've also been doing a lot of work across the other areas of the watershed, working on municipal roads and also stormwater regulations. So it's not just about agriculture, although that's a little bit of what I'm going to focus on tonight, just because that's a big part of what the conservation district focuses on. So in the Lake Memphremagog watershed, we've been doing some tracking and accounting of all of the different practices that we know that farmers have been implementing across federal funding and state funding, things like the cover cropping, manure injection, no-till practices. And overall, if you look at all of those practices, we estimate that we've gotten about 17% of the way there to meeting our reduction target for the Lake Memphremagog watershed. So pretty significant progress, but we have a long way to go. And pretty similar with the Missisquoi watershed, we do that tracking accounting suggests that we've gotten about 24% of the way to meeting our phosphorus reduction target for the Missisquoi Bay. So one of the challenges is that this is all kind of a paperwork exercise where we say you do an acre of cover crop and we think this is how much it's going to reduce the phosphorus going into our lake. And so we also get out there our quality monitoring of the lakes themselves and some of the streams that are getting to the lakes. And so unfortunately, we haven't yet been able to show some improvements in Missisquoi Bay or Lake Memphremagog. Those phosphorus levels have remained pretty consistent in those lakes, which isn't too surprising because it takes a long time to see those improvements over those large water bodies. But in the Lake Memphremagog watershed, we also monitor the 4 major tributaries that go into the lake. So that's the Black River, the Barton, the Clyde, and the Johns. And we actually are starting to see some indications that those nutrient levels in those 4 major tributaries are starting to go down. So just kind of the initial indications that we're making some progress there. And then the other thing that we've been working on closely with Sarah is actually going out and doing smaller scale water quality monitoring right on individual farms. And the Lidbacks have been gracious to allow us that on on their farm to do that. And when we actually get out on the individual farm scale, when we do these practices and we implement those, we've actually had a number of cases where we can show before and after where we've implemented these practices, we've seen some pretty significant improvements in water quality in those smaller streams. So it just essentially takes a while before all of those small efforts across the watershed trickle down to the larger stream. So I think that's, to me, one of the real positive stories is that we're seeing a lot of practices get implemented out across the landscape. You know, we're also seeing new and kind of innovative practices, things like manure injection and drag lines, and some of these new practices that farmers are implementing that we really think will help meet those reduction targets. On the flip side, we are seeing some cases where we get out there and we do our water quality monitoring, and we don't see the improvements that we had hoped to. And so one of the things that I've learned over the times, it's not just implementing those practices, but it's really doing them well. So sometimes it takes a couple of years before you really know that you've got the systems down. So you can do manure injection when the soils might be too wet. So it might take a couple of years to really figure those things out. So I guess the point there is it does take some ongoing technical support. And I think that's where Sarah and the conservation district are really great in terms of working with farmers to do those things. And I think another challenge that we're faced with is climate change and some of the increased runoff events that we're seeing. So as we've seen the last 2 summers, these really intense rainfall events, whatever practices you might put out there, they're not really designed to handle the type of rain events that we've been seeing. So we are having to adjust and think about additional practices that we need to put into place to handle those increased runoff events. So that's another challenge that we're faced with in terms of meeting these water quality targets. Yeah, so I think that's my quick slam on the water quality side of things. Yeah.
Most of our large lakes in Vermont are international lakes.
Yeah.
Canada. Do they have any skin in this game?
Yes, that's a really good question, and it's a little bit complicated for Lake Vermont. So Lake Champlain, they do have skin in that game. They were part of the cleanup plan in the what we call our total maximum daily load that really identified how we would reduce phosphorus to Lake Champlain. Lake Vermont is a little bit interesting because the Vermont portions of the lake are pretty shallow. And so the nutrient levels on the Vermont portions of the lake are quite a bit higher than what they are up in Quebec. So in Vermont, the lake is considered impaired. We have a target of 14 micrograms per liter, and we're around 18. So we have a little ways to go. And in Quebec, they're right around what their nutrient target is. So they're not officially part of our cleanup plan, but we do collaborate really closely with them. And they are working, you know, on the same issues and implementing a lot of the same practices across roads and with farmers. And we collaborate quite a bit to try to make sure that we're both working on both sides of the border. But it is a little bit of a complicated dynamic there. And it's really interesting. We have a Quebec Vermont steering committee that meets twice per year to really try to coordinate those efforts. Yeah. Okay. Well, that we will move from the water.
I'm taking off my conservation district hat, put on my county forester hat. Sarah asked just to give a quick update or challenges and advances related to forests. And I'm going to start with the concerns, the challenges, and end on the advances, because I like it that way. The big concerns that I think of when I think of our forests, Ben just mentioned it, but it's our changing climate. And that those impacts on our forests through lots of different ways. Just how even insects in general, whether they're invasive like emerald ash borer, or even our native insects. And I keep staring out when I gave this talk 3 hours ago, I was staring out that window behind Bob's Quick Stop. If we were to go back to 2017, that whole hillside was defoliated by forest tent caterpillar. Forest tent caterpillar is a native insect, but what we're seeing is the impacts, the stresses on those trees are more severe now because we add in, like what followed after that defoliation was a dry period. And that, so weather plays into it. And on the thinner soils, particularly if you went up this ridge to Coventry, we started seeing chunks as big as like 15-acre patches of maple dead. And it's tying our normal stress with the stress of climate change. And we're starting to feel that. We see it particularly with balsam fir. Balsam woolly adelgid, which is a non-native insect, but it's been here a century. The impacts of that insect, we're starting to really see a lot of trees die.
because you add in really hot weather in the summertime. We get that 90-degree stretch, or even now multiple weeks of 90 degrees, which we didn't used to have. Balsam fir is a boreal species. We're on the southern end of its range. That's a big stress for a boreal species to have 90-degree heat. Or when you flip from really, really wet, like July was really, really wet. And then I was working on forest fires in Vermont in October. It got really, really dry, particularly down in southern Vermont. And that was abnormal. So those sorts of flipping from extremes are having impacts on our trees. The other thing related to climate change is our ability to work in the woods, operations. And Steve and I were out, was last week or the week before in Europe, and not able to freeze in soils. That's something we're seeing across the board here, where this is our real winter, right? The real winter started like January 2nd, and we had a thaw right before it, and it's messing with the soils. So even when we hit our real winter pattern that we haven't had for a few years, we're still feeling it's still not real. And our soils still aren't frozen. So that's impacting our ability to work in the woods. We don't really even consider much of a season in the summer. That used to be, well, we'll get a window of 2 or 3 months in the summer. Some guys aren't even working in the summer anymore. And instead you aim for that 2-week job in the fall, but then you start up work when the winter happens. But winter work is really disrupted between freeze-thaw cycles, which hopefully won't happen until April. And then the big one that I'm seeing across the board is regeneration. Young trees getting started, seeds germinating, becoming seedlings and growing into saplings. That's a big stress in our forests that I think we're just starting to appreciate. A combination of what I talked about, the wackiness of weather, that has an impact on seeds' ability to even germinate. And then once they do germinate, if they get up to about this high, it's a buffet for a really high deer population we have right now, or it's competing with non-native invasive species. So that young trees getting growing, that regeneration is actually a big concern I have in my forest. But there's good news. One is there's a lot of talk about our forests right now. People care about them. The talk is all across the board on what we should do with our forests. But I guess I see it as we're talking about the forest. That's good. Because we talk about them, then we care about them. We learn about them. There's an opportunity there with that increased awareness to talk and make connections to our use in the woods as well. If we're using the woods and we're generating forest products, that's great. That's also supporting our forest economy. We've got several mills within just 6 miles of here, up and down Route 14. That's a lot of jobs for the area. And it's also this conversation, even though it's coming from all angles, there's a lot of talk about the forest. And I see that as a good thing. We're seeing just in our numbers, we talked earlier about the required agricultural practices. For maintaining water quality, we've got the same in the woods. They're called the acceptable management practices for maintaining water quality. We've seen over the last few years, particularly in the Northeast Kingdom, a decrease in violations and an increase in technical assistance requests. So more people saying, hey, I've got something going on out here. What should I do before there's a problem, and less mud in the brook? That's a good thing. And then the other thing is we're increasing our knowledge of how the woods work. And we still have a long ways to understand fully how the woods work, but we're learning a little more each year. And with that is coming, I think, an increased interest in understanding that from the landowners. What do I do with my woods? How do I make my forest more resilient to climate change? What practices are out there that I can do, some of which NRCS can pay you to do, like managing crop tree release and timber stand improvement work? That's things that NRCS has money out there waiting for you to do. And when the landowner says, what do I do to make my trees more healthy and resilient for a changing climate? I'd say, well, crop tree release is going to increase their vigor. If you're looking at managing balsam fir, that timber stand improvement is the best thing you could do. And NRCS will pay you to do it. So that's sort of that increase in knowledge, and also increase in, and I think folks interested in that is going to hopefully help us with those challenges. That's all I've got in the woods.
Now let's get into the interactive part. Back up a little bit. Yes. So what we're going to do is we're going to break into 3 groups. You get to introduce yourself to your new partners, because I can see everybody started off in threes here very nicely. So I want these two tables to be together. Let's amalgamate these three tables together, and those two tables back there. I have been told that you guys can be facilitators. And what we're gonna do. Let's go this for a second. This form, everybody should have this form. You're gonna do a couple of things. The first few minutes is everybody individually writes on this. Then you're gonna, after a couple minutes, you're gonna share with the group what you got. And then our facilitators are going to bring out the key points from your discussion. And so the first part of this, we're gonna go, we're gonna stick with the first major question that I thought is, what are the three biggest conservation issues that you see? Or few minutes to work on it on your own, and then we'll bring it together. Okay. Well, yeah, the way it's set up. That's happening. The purpose and first, it's kind of like why we face the Players. Plays against us. And the folks that you're now dealing like these. Right. Yeah. It's right, fertilizer. Yeah, it's a real. But like, I don't want to smell the door. But I still want to use an acre.
Yeah.
Things are fun just anyhow. That's the first thing. That's off directly opposed to it's. Right. Right there. You don't need the money, isn't it? But they still want, they still. That's what it's. I wish it could be like.
That's really
Sounds where. You like then saying the holiday, and then what are we missing? Buy another. This one is funded. I think. Going in front of the jazz. That's part of
This is more like. Yeah. That's in the stuff that.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah. So it's nothing that I relation to I see from that sense else like.
So would you say bump it all in the part?
Okay. Right. That's how we see it. And also they lead to the whole thing. And once again, the species is between the slides. That would be great. And ours. Yeah.
Something on trees, fall, trees, you know, like this, and just get 20, 30 people for a couple of hours, and just do an activity. You know.
So as long as it's ecosystems,
Right.
players on it.
Yeah, of course.
There you go.
We're just.
Yeah, it's not too loud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of. I know.
Yeah, like.
So.
Yeah, so there's a whole, I mean, there's legislation and rules around weight boats that are limited to certain lakes.
Yeah.
And then also limited to transport of weight boats back and forth, but if you have someone who has weight boats on the lake, then. Yeah,
Then it's
there-
Right.
with invasive, but doesn't really address the issues of the weights. So they do have regulations for how safe they're supposed to be away from the shoreline. And I do think there is a section I want to try to, there's individual rules for each lake that you can do.
It's gonna enforce it.
That's the lighting.
Yes, so I was preferring. Yeah. I'm not water. Seems like. Yes.
It's hard water. Yeah, that's. So. Wow.
Using that.
But.
I was arguing, my son,
What do you think? And so I think.
So I'm working out my I sort of just not. No, like, you be there, I'm straight saying, I'm not anything. And like, it's not for a lot of. Got to keep it, so that it's. Get it to be these. What I work with.
And to mitigation.
Talk about it. So we're to the higher. That's really. I don't think it's.
You know, I think that's technically too, sometimes there's some technical research out there that may be able to help. I think what's really hard is all these really small changes, you know, with these main events there, changing on there. It's hard. Yep.
That we've been there, like they would come down here and go, let's take the other side. Just get it to the rest of the way from the farmer. It's like all the person that's
You know.
Well, trees are.
Right now.
I'll tell you something. Read stuff. So it's what's
It's getting.
that's a great.
5 minute warning.
And I can also.
Some water. This goes to the.
Yeah, you have great.
Well, I actually think big GIT. I was in progressive. Lots of firms.
But again. Yeah, it's actually risky in these places, safe soils. And I think that's where the more people are around, the more, I think the tendency sometimes when people think water kind of moving around is like to put it into one place. And I think that tendency, not saying you gotta do that around the barn, you gotta do it around the house. But I think that's an interesting idea. Sometimes people do that, and they know that or you concentrate that water, it gives it more fixed force. And so that's where it actually tries to work and take places like pigeons that they don't need anymore and turn more back into wetland. Slow that water down a little bit. So it just gets more dynamic, kind of like that. Waiting and obeying those things can allow the continue to work. In areas where we have other, I don't know if you have development from you or if it's run off from the forest that's coming. Yeah.
I mean, they love this last summer. We had that. So you have, I just. There are some.
Like,
It's
everybody.
Watersheds or something like this. It's easiest to play this shit. Yeah, it's not. It's the phosphorus. The phosphorus has to be in the soil. It's like region with soil. To get this flagship. So this thing. Actually turning.
Yeah, a lot of my stuff is covered. Education is one thing that wasn't mentioned, because community volunteers. I'm a partner with data, and I'm still help out on some because I do. And I scoured the internet trying to find somewhere I could create groups. And I do some.
So there's definitely some,
Training events.
it'd be good.
Yeah, I feel like there's probably more people like me around you guys. Who would be, here's this organization, and maybe that's what.
I'd like to find. I don't know. Right. Now that I want to big fuss and it's.
Yes. Yeah. I do know about Facebook.
Especially.
Oh, good to see it now.
Have fun. We have a strong check.
So I was allowed to, she started 4-H last year. She was.
Oh, it's fine.
Changed. It's in a conversation. Something.
Some of the things that work in the conservation district. And they really are focused on a lot of water recreation. And so they'd actually be like, if you were interested in having someone like provide you a little support to think about just your during the districts, they would be helpful in terms of like looking at that. But they do a little bit of volunteer stuff that's really active. Water project.
Yeah.
They're also really great. Unfortunately,
They have.
I'm always 40, but I feel like my kids are going to see probably I do. Biggest one. Now they're just younger people, small farmers are just dying. Oh, that's too bad. They shouldn't have to do that. They should be able to sustain themselves.
Sometimes surprised with them. Like the double, like you're my.
Time is up. Wrap up your conversations and we'll start hearing back from the tables here. To join the bigger group. All right.
Yeah.
It's all right. I think so. I'm gonna start with just take longer. I'm gonna say it. All right, really quickly, we covered one of the wide range of conservation issues. And these are in no order other than where they came up in the conversation. Land pressure, just that there's lots of change in ownership in the area, and that's creating some conflicts and challenges. Climate change was discussed a lot in the presentations, but wasn't talked about. Was kind of what does adaptation look like? How do you maintain kind of a more are there things you can do, strategies both in the forest and then also in ag that might make it easier to transition through to a new climate? Ag consolidation, small farms transitioning to larger farms through aggregation. Is there a way to do that that might include small farmers somehow or enhance conservation during that application process? We also talked quite a bit about soil degradation, the loss of soil, particularly like in floodplains. Kind of noting that maybe it's really heavy. The rivers are around. That's a big issue.
And then really quickly, we're ending on, just government money, how it's spread out widely versus targeting specific issues. If you could target those issues and concentrate the money there, we might solve specific problems better. And then also just education on what programs are available to farmers and landowners.
Nice list. Let's start with the middle table.
And sum up, we were all over the place. So again, just kind of going down the list of, helping the, like, see some efforts, helping with the water management, because obviously too much. So everybody's trying to figure out what to do with all that, as water flows across the fields, and again, into the floodplain enhancement and how to, I guess, manage the floodplain situation in a way which Ben has been working diligently on some of that stuff. We'd be great to talk to you about that. Deer defoliation came up with large amounts of deer we've got, of course. And some of the things that were brought up that in the areas that we could put some effort would be supporting wildlife through wildlife corridors, maybe mapping these out and see if we could come up with some sort of plan to connect these things to the state. Maybe let landowners know and try and get a collective effort. I know all these things was a kind of a theme of our table was how do we get everybody involved with this effort, like letting landowners know, have more education, more outreach, so that everybody's kind of on the same page and going for the same things. And just letting more people know what we are doing, and so that there can be more of a movement in that direction. So another great idea came up was creating little workshops and have groups about this size get together throughout the summer and do tree pruning or, learn about trees in the forest and just different things that are going on and just educate more people. And again, having the youth that want to come up and farm, like have an economy that supports these small farms and gives all these folks a chance to farm. I'm a small farmer as well. And almost everybody in here is probably a farmer. So, having a viable lifestyle and just try and support that. We talked about that in the last meeting as well. If we can, that is the backbone of our economy. And if we can keep it that way, I think it's also the backbone of our tourism, because people come here because that's what they want to see and that's what they want to experience. And honestly, we're the last state left standing that can still pull that off, I think. Because everyone else can find it to the house and suburbs and cul-de-sacs. So I feel like we have a chance. So we could band together. Let's see what else we got. Let's see. If I could read my hand here.
Contamination, water.
Yep, water quality and contamination and the runoff from farms and trash in the roads and especially all the things that the flooding is starting to bring down. And, people are getting rashes, things like that. They're playing on some of this stuff. And so I think movements towards some cleanup and mapping aquifers, letting people know what the health of aquifers are came up. Talked about all kinds of stuff.
You guys were all over it.
Yeah, we didn't even get to the second question. So
No, we're getting to the second question.
yeah. All right.
It's still coming.
Yeah. So I think that was the mitigation of invasive species as well. We had a chat about. So I think activities towards that stuff is in that. Even YouTube videos came out to public outreach, and also prioritization of efforts and having kind of a game and theory game planning for everybody to be on board with. So we'll be here.
All right.
That's some of the.
Yeah. Last year, Ben.
James, do you want to go or do you?
So we talked, we started out talking a little bit about, I manage, cutting, forest cutting. Power lines and other places that, then, cause problems with, increased runoff, but also, and the introduction of, invasives. And some invasive control. We kept coming back to education. And that was a real important piece to try to find ways to educate people on, the importance of where we live. We talked about wake folks and the problems that they cause with invasive erosion. That to water quality was another as conservation activities. And also, just, how do you manage, water on your own land that's coming from, the watershed above you? How do you mitigate that and protect your water?
I guess just you had the final one, just about sometimes it seems like people don't appreciate the the resources that are out there, and I think it kind of comes back to maybe the education opportunity.
All right. The second part of this exercise is I want you to consider these fun little graphs that are, okay? The ones that are hard to read. Basically, what this is like, this is the number of NRCS practices that for 2018, or like an itemized list of all of the funding that was dispersed by the NRCS. And then you can see over on the far right-hand corner side of that, the most frequently scheduled practices. So the question here, kind of given what you see there, is what are we missing with what's been funded before in the past with this? Taking your past, and where do you think we should, whether that house, that money is?
I got a question.
Yeah.
Upland wildlife habitat management. Can somebody explain that to me?
A lot, and someone else may have a better big, a lot of that is like either catch pets in forest or maintain, kind of like managing the scenery. Specific wildlife.
Yeah, it's also. Trying.
Okay. I bet that's the second meeting of two.
So, you give you all 15 minutes, a couple of minutes to think on by yourselves, and then the rest of the time to speak out as a group. And make sure you fill in the bottom half of your page if you haven't already done so. And we will be collecting these.
Can you read any of that?
Yeah, it's just
Lots of cover traffic and lots of, is that by money or is it by? By contracts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those contracts and money don't necessarily lie. Well, one manure pit makes a lot of exact money. By money, those things would be.
Like a few couple of things. Cost them. They just sell. Maybe even costing. Yes, exactly.
Kind of helps explain.
I think too, it's like we don't need to be too focused on the NRCS. No, because like
So they could like say, I'm a woodlot, we need to woodlot. Timber is for pink. Okay, so there would be. And that's like positive impacts on the water. So that's the piece we don't see that like give us more hope. But what's interesting about that is
Is that even? Okay, so like, gracious leaders to finance.
And that is exactly what is.
I think.
So
We are. That's gonna be.
and I see them.
That's.
What I think it's and we came out with a lot of big mission and it has to say that. And the conservation is coming to that. And it's yeah, there's and I would say that I would have people, but one of the things, like, there's a lot of easy food, like milk, oil, and food house. They're own, yes.
The thing that's not here.
But also, we're going
Increase soil. There's a lot of stuff on here.
Contacts and stuff, if I can get my card, email you something.
I mean, I get.
Yeah. You're like,
You can't put big log, they're built regularly, and they're turning all that young. They're looking to see a house. The next 5 to 7 years, all that feed here. And you go to Essex County, they're all supports are these series all the dead stand. You know, and they're like, you gotta turn over your fullest. And under good practices.
yes, I guess.
Like extent of there's an elevation and the number that Vermont says you just cut up that, but maintenance like 1,500 feet tall. And I just feel like there's more sustainable deer. It's main part of the stuff we have. But it's like there's deer in the city of Newport running rampant. And I think they walk for 7 miles and that's probably not even cut a deer track. How are there this year? That's a problem. You know, there's.
But it's kind of like, how would you like to see or what support would be helpful for you?
The big trees, but like they make stuff. You know, all the raspberry bushes and that. Those you know, and then they turn into, you know, other apple trees and the trees can come down. It's kind of like. Guards.
Yeah.
Around next year.
Well, you know, that is.
They've asked.
Yeah.
And things on some level, make it a level opportunity to create an action plan, make a lot of it, we just not understand. Like giving that message to Sarah as you think about retention, is, you know, thinking about maybe there are some community-based elements. Yeah, and there's just, that's not gonna fun.
Might be a great gentleman.
Areas in Essex County, there's Yeah, no, I think that's a great.
We see what they call it. So like, it's gonna go, that's start being odd, like.
Something like.
Yeah, it's really exactly. Is we are funding a lot of clean science. But I think that's something we've talked basically about community market, so we can kind of see what some of the water projects look like. It's not cheap for right now. I mean, no, like when I do program, I had a whole like target that program like this. I think we can. I don't need more.
Now, it's courtesy of yourself, right? It's fine, you're out of state, or they agree for somebody. Certain date. Why? You guys have 400 acres of people. Phoenix, you know, and it's like. And everybody wants to post that. That's there's 100 acres and it's a conservation and they can't talk. Which everybody says you can't do, but you can't. I know some. Now, I stand up, it's not. It's the same coming up, but. I don't have $5,000 to give you. Like they'll dig every year on the So, yeah.
Yeah, kind of like conservation thing, bunch.
So we
It's in Westburg and the others. So it's like, they did two of these assets pretty recently. Yeah, I don't know if it's like, safe house forest, I think that's been like, creating the town. I don't know if you guys know. 6 miles determined goals. It's just on the river. Yes, this is the program that's actually 60 and 70. They're really worried about people putting land. But they eventually buy 16 and a half acres on either side. Good chunk of land. Those we're like, you don't necessarily want to fly trail. Like, literally, you know, yeah. And then you want to electric skate. Don't even see the no water. So they're filling up with let's see. Well, no, it just has to be more efficient. It's amazing. A giant year. No, you're not. Yeah. But it does have like small farm. Your own skill is my sport. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's some of it. Maybe the challenge, like the transfaction plan, is that it's too big, so yeah, it might be a little hard to sell where your challenge is. Talk to me, it's a couple pages, but you know, I mean, it's the way it's environment. So it's interesting to think about. I can't like change like so. Maybe an interesting question for us to think about. It's the first time. So I think I'm lost. I'm trying to see how it's able to stack and use a lot of interesting with the elements that are filing share. That's why I think this play to comes with a people. We need to what's the practice step. And they're like, oh, let's work on so like how do what the conservation society create challenges based on working and start to focus on everybody on those things. That's what yeah.
Work out. Yeah, I mean. Yeah.
Maybe something.
I think we all have a good yeah, the point here is that it's not element the issue is I think that's a little bit challenging. It's
Let's bring it back together with the large group. And I'm going to pause this.
No, yes, no.
Yeah, all right, let's switch it up in here, this group first.
Well, we took that again, you know, around this table, there wasn't a lot of background in it, yeah, so it was kind of a hard ask really for what, what from there, what practice is missing. But I think, there's a lot of more broader things that I think are very worth mentioning. Once again, is to feel that, more effort and funding needs to go into education. Local plans to involve the community. So taking like a larger tactical basin plan and breaking that down into what they can do. And then we decided the legislation was doing that. And then yeah. Oh yeah, no, I know. And another interesting thing was talked about folks who have gone on these what they call either woods walks or community walk or however you want to call it, where you're actually going out and taking a look at maybe a section of woods that somebody wants to find. And looking at what to look for before you cut, or something that has been cut and going out and looking at regeneration thing. And then funding for marketing, which basically is funding to be able to tell a story and to talk about what still needs to be done. And that, and I guess, and then also more funding for conservation easements, within the such for public access. Yep. Okay.
All right. Usually you're getting off early. Yeah, skip. So we had a rich discussion. So starting off, just in general, translation of the available options is helpful because looking at this list, what's they mean, what's these one mean, great. There is invasive species management, but more emphasis on that would be important just as it's a broader problem. In general, paying farmers to build organic matter in the soil, incentivizing other stable fertilizers beyond synthetic and commercial. Consumer education, and it sounds like kind of jumping off of what you talked about, also specifically related to like certification. What does that mean? Like authentic certification, there's even a role for NRCS to get involved, whether it's like local certification. You have like business connection, connecting small organizations and creating not siloed between local organizations. And then in general, big comment of like NRCS money should stick locally, maybe even with things like equipment, helping with equipment purchases. We just talked about how in one state they were kind of trading the old tractor for a new, more efficient tractor. Things that could directly benefit with kind of infrastructure. Right. Now you're that's class.
Now, so again, ours goes back to trying to plug holes with getting some more regional planning. I think these tactical basin plans sound like we need bigger posters or something.
Yeah.
I think more people can know about these things and spend more effort on trying to create a regional plan, a statewide plan, something that everybody knows about, and just has some clear objectives of where we're trying to go, and also where we're trying to go in the future, as opposed to just trying to put fires out right now. Like where we get the long view, I guess. And also, we talked quite a bit about managing the forest for the wildlife and trying to utilize the hunters that we have to sort out deer populations and making sure that these deer have the food to thrive. But also have the hunters that can keep them from thriving with type of games. And also, part of that bigger regional plan is utilizing town conservation commissions and using the other resources that we already have, these other silos of folks that are already doing work, and we can kind of bring everybody into let's create. No, that's just. But if we can bring everybody together into this mission, make things better. We can put our efforts into that. I'm saying anything. There's a longer talk about hunting and forest management.
All right. So what happens now? So we're going to be collecting all the sheets that you've been working on. This information is going to get summarized and we're going to be disseminating this. Or first, we're going to be thinking about this at a partners workshop in a couple of weeks, where we SBC, local entities, and really sorting through both the lunch session and the dinner session, and combining all these topics together. And we'll see what there's always a few common denominators across both sessions for education and increased visibility of plans. I think that kind of public engagement, what we're trying to do here with the local work group. This is the kind of thing we want to see more of. Then there's other practical things that keep rising to the top, like water quality and infrastructure resiliency. And I like this table that, and I think it might be your personality, Jared. Everybody got 4 songs rates this evening. I didn't hear it as much over lunchtime. But it's good to hear more thoughts about how what's going on within the forest and bring to life, because my head is usually within the forest to right carrying buffers, so getting up to would be a nice change. I need to hear. Anyways, let's see. I have some closing remarks. Couple of things to mention is we do have a plant sale. So while we're talking forests and trees, Orleans County is hosting a plant sale. Please check out our live. If you have not completed the survey, I know this is a packet, but there is an online version as well. That's more streamlined. And you get a chance to win a $50 gift certificate to the plant set. If you want to do it the old fashioned way, you can hand it to the Alyssa at the desk and make sure someone gets it. But be sure you get your name on it. So if you do it, bring that up. And finally, stay in touch. Please contact the conservation district. Oh, I think it's the last thing. I forgot about that. Never mind. You gotta see who the tonight's winner is already. They're too fast. That's fine. Ooh, we're up now. All right.
So we're gonna just do this for this one. Randy. Careful about that, let's tip over with the head and stuff. All right. And this one. We've got Steve.
Oh, there you go. That's what it's looking for.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah, thank you all. All. Yeah.
Maybe not.
Right.